the shock of it all. How can this be my story? But in letting it shock me and break my heart, what I'm doing is accepting it, is radical acceptance of the story that God is writing. Because if you can radically accept and take ownership and responsibility for your own life, then you can live it really well for the glory of God.
At age 26, Katherine Wolf miraculously survived a massive stroke. Her incredible journey includes having to relearn how to talk, walk, and navigate a world with disabilities. Her ministry is Hope Heals, and as a speaker, a podcast host, and author, she's disrupting the myth that joy can only be found in a pain-free life. Her latest book is Treasures in the Dark. Katherine, it's such a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, I think that this topic we're talking about is so very, very important, and you can speak to it with credibility that others cannot. And so I just want to thank you for writing this.
Thank you. Thank you. I am so thankful that I've had this opportunity to write this.
Well, one of the things that you say in your book is that the first step in healing is allowing my story to break my own heart.
Right.
Can you explain how that jumpstarts your healing and doesn't lead to someone feeling sorry for themselves?
Absolutely. You know, I think the first step when you have horrific tragedy and suffering of any kind is to stare it down, to see it. I think God calls us to that again and again in the Bible, to return to it, to lament before we can then move on, which is so silly. I don't mean that. I mean move forward from tragedy, because you're never going to move on. You're never going to forget where you've been, but you can, I believe, move forward. And part of that is seeing it for what it is. So you won't stay there, I believe, but you must start there, I believe.
And let the reality of what has taken place, your loss, your tragedy, break your own heart and not try to sugarcoat it or try to deny it or avoid the way you feel about it, but embrace it all.
Absolutely. I have seen in just staring deep at this story and letting my own heart be broken and my mind bewildered, there's such healing and the shock of it all. How can this be my story? But in letting it shock me and break my heart, what I'm doing is accepting it, is radical acceptance of the story that God is writing. Because if you can radically accept and take ownership and responsibility for your own life, then you can live it really well for the glory of God. I believe you can find the treasures in the darkness, and they're not always apparent if you're denying the story and pretending it's not your life. As it says in Ecclesiastes, it is better to go to the house of mourning than the house of feasting. Why is that? Because then you can see things for what they really are, I believe.
Wow. I love that you've got all of these reflections in your book, Treasures in the Dark. In Reflection 25, you say that maybe this good, hard life is less about ease and more about showing up scared to the ongoing hard with ongoing hope.
Yes.
Unpack that for us.
Oh, wow. Life is so scary. We live in a fallen world. Horrible things happen constantly. There's a lot to be scared of, for sure. But let's show up scared to the ongoing hurts of this world and keep a deep hope, because I believe hope is this cycle. You know, I used to read Romans 5:3, and suffering produces perseverance, character, hope, and I got the hope. I won't be put to shame. So now I go on vacation for life. Like that's how it works, Romans 5:3. And now I know too much to think that. That's ridiculous. What it means is suffering produces perseverance, hope ultimately to take you back into this cycle that is this beautiful force pushing us forward into the ongoing hurt, but with ongoing hope. Our hope gets fortified and strengthened because of what we've been through, because we've gone through the cycle and our hope is renewed. There is no quota on suffering this side of heaven. So it's so important that we are filled and fortified and sustained by Jesus in the mess of it to go back in.
Wow. Wow. Can you give us an example of something that you have struggled with in embracing your loss?
Yeah.
Or something that someone close to you has struggled with or are struggling with?
For sure. My transformation. So as a 26-year-old, I was typically able-bodied, had just had a perfectly healthy baby boy, no medical history, no family history, no indication there was anything abnormal at work in my body. Had a massive brainstem stroke, became severely disabled, can no longer walk unassisted very well, have a paralyzed face, a hand that doesn't work, a plethora of health issues. So for me, it could have been like complete denial of the story and no acceptance, or it could be I have to really decide, make a decision to choose this life and choose to believe and see, as it says in Psalm 16:6, that the boundary lines have fallen in pleasant places, that somehow God is in this story. And it's so nuts and so terrible and so shocking, and yet can I reframe in this upside-down kingdom of God that something is unique and at work here? And this is, for some reason, what God had for my life and my story, and I'm going to live it very well.
Katherine, you also say that you trade anxious what-ifs for hopeful what-ifs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, explain how that works.
So I think we are all on this horrific what-if loop, aren't we? What if this happened? What if this? What if that? What if that? What if I married this guy? What if I had this kid? What if I did this? And it's so anxiety riddled, and we're just gripped by the what-ifs of life. And it's this terrible loop. I believe the escape hatch off of this loop is hope. Because hope gives us permission to live our actual lives. So I believe we move from the what if to the what is in the story. And the what is actually all that matters, because it actually is what's real. What is? What if is totally irrelevant. It doesn't matter. When I was 20 years old, I went to Stanford University in Birmingham, Alabama, and emceed the Step Sing show. And this platform would go up and down in the orchestra pit to lift me up, and I'd get terribly dizzy. I eventually went to the doctor, and without even eye contact, horrific bedside manner, I was prescribed medication for vertigo and diagnosed with vertigo. Had that doctor ordered an MRI, he would have seen I had a mass on my brainstem. Imagine the what ifs of what if he would have seen that? What if I would have had an MRI? I wouldn't have had a stroke. The what ifs then, though, would be a new loop. What if I knew? Would I have operated? What if? Would I have gotten married? What if? Would I have had children? Like, whole new set over here.
Yeah.
So the escape hatch of all these loops is that hope says, this is it. Live here in your real life.
Wow. It's the answer for people who are stuck in the anxiety loop of asking, what if, what if, what if, what if, and playing the blame game. And if this person had done that, like that doctor, if he had done this, then I wouldn't happen to happen. And then that leads them to, well, is God even real? And does he even care? And if he could heal me, why doesn't he?
Right.
And all of these things, which I know you address in your book.
Very much.
How important is it to share your pain with others in the healing process?
It's a huge part of it. When we are sharing what we are going through, neurobiology has proven it changes how we feel about our suffering. So when I'm telling my story to an empathetic listener, I am receiving it differently to my head and my heart. It is creating new neuropathways.
And that actually helps in the healing process.
It's a game changer, because when I'm feeling differently about my own story, I'm willing to live it differently, of course. It's everything.
In reflection number 43 in your book, you talk about being wheelchair-free instead of wheelchair-bound. And you say true freedom is deciding to want the life I have because it's the life I was given.
Yep.
Can you explain that?
You can choose to love what you got. I think it's very powerful, and our world longs to deny what is. But what if we said, no, this is my life, and God gave this to me, and I'm going to trust Him and live it, and I'm going to learn to love it.
Katherine, how can you help someone who has experienced great tragedy or loss or disappointment, who is wrestling with this idea of what you just said? This is the life God gave me, so I'm going to choose to love it. Some would say, God never gave me this life. Somebody else took away the life God wanted to give me, and this is what I got instead.
Right. First of all, to be completely honest, that's not accurate.
Why is it not accurate?
Because if you trust that ultimately God is writing your story, and He is sovereign, and He's numbered our days, there are no mistakes, because God doesn't make mistakes. And I say that so tenderly, because there is so much pain in all of our stories. Horrible tragedies have happened. But the reality is we can, in much time, and with much grace, radically accept the story God is writing through our lives. It's through pain and tears that you say, this is all I've got, and what am I going to do with what I got?
I have a very good friend. He's a wise old owl in my life whose wife was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and he tells the story of how she loved the Lord with all of her heart, studies His word day and night, and she called her mom over to the house and sat on the couch while she explained to her that she has this brain tumor that was terminal. And within 5 minutes or so, the two of them were laughing on the couch, and they were smiling, and they were singing songs of praise. And he speaks in terms that humble me, because he's saying what you're saying, and that is, she got her greatest wish, which is to be with Christ and to see Him face to face, and to be able to live with dignity and to honor God with the life that He has given her.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I think many times in our deep, horrible suffering, there can be this glimpse behind the veil. There can be a sense that things are so bad and so rock bottom that the only thing we can do is look up. And I think when we do that, when we look up, I'm getting chills talking about it, there is this divine experience of peace in the midst of just the storms of it all. We have this camp for families with disabilities, and you think it would be terribly sad to engage all these different families with profound disabilities in their story. And yet it's like this party. It's so fun, so fabulous, so like celebration, dance parties, talent shows, joy. And we realize that part of what, when we are in deep suffering of all kinds we do, is disrupt the myth that joy can only come in a pain-free life, because we know too much. We know there is suffering, there is pain, but joy can coexist with pain.
Wow, I think that's so important, because how many people do we know, and how many times do I myself feel, I don't know if you feel this anymore, that why did this happen to me? And all of a sudden, we just expect that we ought to have this pain-free life. If we don't disrupt that myth, we're going to live a miserable life, because pain is part of the deal.
Absolutely. So many times as American Christians, we can get on board, even though we would say, like, we do not believe the prosperity gospel. Like, no way. That's so, like, nothing we would touch. But we believe for prosperity gospel 2.0 that says, I'm a good soldier for Jesus, so I get the good life, or I'm doing good, so I get good. But the reality is we have completely misidentified what good actually means. It says in Psalm 84:11 that no good thing does God withhold from those walking uprightly with him. And how could that be true when we know people whose lives are ravaged and they're the good ones for Jesus? Well, that's because truly good things are not the physical things of this world. They're not the goodies we get. They're not the health or the wealth or the access. No, read the Beatitudes. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek. Like, our understanding is so off that we've bought into something really sad, I believe.
Katherine, you also say that it's so important not only to rejoice in the good times, but to celebrate God's presence and his provision in the middle of your suffering. What does that look like? I mean, you don't throw a party and say, come celebrate with me, everybody. What are you celebrating?
That's funny you say that. Yes, I do. And that's the key to it all, actually. If you follow me on social media, know I hashtag don't wait to celebrate all the time. Because none of us are promised tomorrow. And particularly as far as throwing a party, I'm a big fan of celebrate the fact that things may not be going your way. Celebrate the hard stuff. Gather a group of people and celebrate the goodness of God within these really hard stories. I call it the SOS group, my Sisters of Suffering. And I have a group of girls who get together and listen empathetically and just believe that the Holy Spirit is bigger and more powerful and on the move, connecting our hearts, aligning us, and comforting us with our broken hearts, actually. It's very powerful.
So the thought is that we can, in the midst of our pain and suffering and our trials, we can celebrate the faithfulness of God, the nearness of God, and the fact that he's using this to develop our character.
Absolutely. Absolutely. God is always working. And if we believe that, then that means in the bad times, in the hard times, in the sad times, God is doing something. I believe what is true in the light is true in the dark. I've seen that in my own life. So I have to continue to press on in the darkness, knowing that there are profound treasures there for me.
In Reflection 54, you explore the purpose.
I'm loving this. Yes,
the purpose of persevering, which leads to character and hope, and the realization that suffering is not the end.
Right.
Does that speak to you personally these days?
Yeah, of course. I believe so deeply that suffering is never the end of our stories. Suffering is the beginning of a new story. Suffering is always the beginning of something new that God is doing.
They just keep getting better and better. I have to keep reading more of these reflections. Number 80, it's possible to give thanks for what is while straining toward what could be. In what ways can you relate to that?
Oh, goodness. So the reality of what is can sometimes not be great. For sure, not easy, not fun. It wasn't real cool to relearn to swallow food. I went 11 months on a tube in my stomach, NPO, nothing per oral. And every morning I didn't get up and think like, oh, today I get to trial an ice chip, and that will be so amazing, and I can't wait. But that deep, horrific, just changing my brain that happened through those nightmares developed me deeply. It changed me. And I believe suffering has the opportunity to take us from what is to possibilities of your mind saying, Lord, this is bad. I feel desperate and lonely and abandoned. And to see him show up and create something new.
Do you know Johnny Erickson Tata?
Very well. She mentored me all of my years in California.
She says things that just blow my mind all of the time. And one of them is she talks about how her disability and the accident that happened to her when she was 17 years old was part of her salvation, her sanctification. She said, it wasn't until that accident that I learned about the depth of my own sin, which brought it all to the surface, her anger, her frustration, her rebellion, all of these things, so that she could turn that over to the Lord, and then says, while I'm not a fan of quadriplegia, she said, I would rather be who I am today and with Jesus in this wheelchair than who I would have been if this never happened to me on my feet.
I love that sentiment so deeply. I really wrestled in Treasures with the words of how do you say something so honest and not make it feel almost like a delusional cliche. And I landed on, I can't say I wouldn't change it. I can't say that. That would be ridiculous. But I can say now, 17 years later, I wouldn't trade it. And that's pretty powerful. Like, would I change this? Maybe. But I can't. But I wouldn't trade it because God has done such profound things. It would be very difficult to look back on the 17 years and say, like, what? It has been so much good stuff. It's been some rockin' horrible stuff. I've had 13 surgeries since the stroke, taken some terrible falls and broken bones. I've had a lot of suffering, and yet there's been a lot of really incredible things that have happened. I've gone on to have a second biological child. I founded a camp for families with disabilities. Our ministry opened a coffee shop that employs people with disabilities. I have a thriving, precious little family. I like to say that there has been a lot of collateral damage, for sure. No one's denying that. But there's also been a lot of collateral gifts all the way. And I will not miss those. I refuse to miss all the ways God is showing up for me. So while I wouldn't change it, or while I would change it, maybe, I wouldn't trade it.
Katherine, tell us all about Hope Heals.
Oh, okay. Hope Heals is our nonprofit, faith-based nonprofit. I can say ministry here. It's our ministry where we create sacred spaces of belonging and belovedness for our friends affected by disability on the outside of their bodies and those affected by disability on the inside, which is every single one of us, coping with brokenness and hardship and tough stuff. And we get to set a big table. We like to say the beautiful truth of Luke 14, the passage in the Bible, that the man ends up inviting everybody to come sit down and eat. Because I believe so deeply, Kirk, that if you are more fortunate than others in any way, which I am super fortunate, that we should spend our lives building a bigger table and inviting people to come and eat. Hungry people to eat. Let's sit them down and celebrate their journey through life. And let's point them to Jesus.
That's right.